learned, oh my God, there's so many people like my parents and so many people that need a voice, and there's no way that I can be all these people's voice. So I just wanted to be somebody's voice. But then I thought, okay, I can't just be an interpreter, because an interpreter can only take me so far. You don't have any power to do anything.
Right.
So this was the only way that I could have to be the person's voice and have power to do something about it, is what I thought. But I never wanted to go to law school. I really didn't like law school. I didn't like anything. I didn't want to learn about anything except immigration law, because that's when I felt that I could help. I felt that that's where I could actually put to use everything that I had learned so far.
Welcome to Above the Legal Limit. I'm your host, Justin Chopin, business owner, lawyer, dad, world's best husband, traveler, and adventure seeker. On this podcast, we mix business with pleasure. We'll dive into growth strategies, entrepreneurial adventures, the business of law, and prove that business isn't boring. So let's get ready, because we are going above the legal limit.
Thanks for coming. I've got
you.
a very special guest here today. Super excited. Miriam, please introduce yourself.
My name is Miriam Crespo. I'm an immigration attorney, and I'm really happy to be here today.
We are very excited to have you. So, full disclosure, Mary and I were in law school together not that long ago. I was going to say many, many years ago, but then that just makes me sound old. So, not that long ago, we were in law school together. And so, I'm so glad to have you on this show, because I follow you on the social media. And the travels. You and your daughter like to travel a lot.
Oh, we do. I think that what I do in immigration law is really heavy.
Yeah.
And so that's the only way that I can continue to do the work that I do, and I like what I do. So.
What is your favorite place to travel to?
I don't know that I have a favorite. I think that her and I just like we always do something that we've never done before that's really hard to do on these trips. So that way I feel like we've accomplished something.
Okay.
So we went to, for my birthday, we went to Mexico, and it's just, we did their version of Disney, but we did all these activities, and I thought we were just gonna lay on a beach, and she decided to do this day that was called the Adrenaline Day, and I was dreading that day, and it turned out to be the best day on our vacation ever. I did all these things that I thought I could never do, and I was like, this is great. But I also, every single moment, thought we were gonna die, and I'm like, either she's gonna be on the news, I'm like this horrible mother, let her do these activities,
exactly,
or I don't know what's gonna happen. But it was amazing. We did this. In the air slingshot thing where you lay on this bed, like a chiropractor bed, and they pull this lever and you just completely fall down, and it's in the air.
How do you feel about that?
I know. I thought I was going to be a horrible mother. Something happened to her, but we survived, and it was great.
How old is she again?
She is 12.
She's 12. Okay.
Yeah,
so
but she's an adventure seeker.
Well, I love that, and I love that she gets to take that sort of ownership of what we're doing, because it So I've got two kids. They're 6 and 8.
Okay.
And so I'm just listening to you, and I'm thinking oh, that'd be great. Let the kids decide, because then there's buy-in, right, and they're all excited about it. But then I can't help but feel like if I let my kids decide, they're we're going to watch TV.
No.
No.
I think we do these things, and every time I'm I don't know about this. I don't know how to feel about this. But it turns out to be the best experience ever. And then I feel really accomplished. And I think that we do that when I'm feeling burnt out at work. So when I come back, I'm I can do anything. So I think we need those.
I agree. And so you are catching me at burnt out mode, right? So I'm
go on vacation,
right? I need,
I'm a sign for you, Justin.
You are catching me. So everybody, we all go through. I tell people here all the time, listen, you're going to do this your whole life. So once you conceptualize, there are a few lessons that I try to give every younger lawyer here. I was one, you need to know that you're going to die. Because once you internalize that, you're going to understand the importance of maintaining a file.
Okay.
Okay. Right?
Okay.
So I had a lawyer once that was always, nothing was ever getting saved right, and I had to say, you don't realize this because you're young. You are going to die. I hope for your sake it is many, many years from now. But if you watch the news, we're not always that fortunate. So your client's case still will be around whether you're here or not. So and the second lesson is, you are going to do this your whole life. If you enjoy the practice of law or working in the firm or being part of our team here, we hope that you're here for the rest of your life. And that means you have to be able to step away. You have to be able to compartmentalize and be okay, well, you know what? That was yesterday. We're going to chalk that up. Today's a new day. If you can't do that, it just wears you down. Because you're right. You deal with some pretty heavy stuff. So Miriam Doe, you do... She does. You do. Immigration work.
I do.
I do not do immigration work. So if anyone's looking for an immigration lawyer, they should be going to the other side of this table. What are some of the heavy things that you see in your practice? Because
So-
I know.
So I think it's kind of funny, like, you know how you just said you got to compartmentalize and, you know, things have to be set aside. But the truth is, like, a lot of what I do kind of falls into life, and I try to use that to teach my daughter things. So, like, I got a letter from her school about, about absences and things like that. So I went and talked to our principal, and I said, you know I'm an attorney, but you don't know what I do. So let me explain to you what I do. I said, I'm an immigration attorney. I said, on my phone, I have pictures of beheadings, people being cut, chopped, all kinds of horrible things that happen to people. I said, so because of that, I really strongly believe in mental health and protecting mental health. And I am going to protect my daughter's mental health to the best of my ability. I said, so there's been days where, she's had a bad day. And so I've let her stay home from school thinking, she's not going to be productive and she needs this. And again, it's because I believe in the power of mental health. And so the same thing comes with our job. The same thing comes with what I do. I see clients all the time, and I tell the people and the girls that work with me in the office, I said, you got to be patient with her. This woman's been through so much, because it's not like people walk around with like a sign like I've been raped, or they killed my father, or somebody died in my hands. And so you just have no idea the types of things that people are walking around with, and the trauma that they haven't overcome, or, that they've never talked to somebody about how they felt about what happened. So I deal, as lawyers, we are used to being the place where people come and deposit their problems. But the type of problems that I'm dealing with are just not your everyday problems.
No,
right?
No, those are real problems. And it's hard because we wear our clients' problems sometimes. Whereas we are, I always say I'm a professional problem solver, really is what I do. So a lot of my clients, not all of them, a lot of my clients don't have the life experience. They're not able to see the forest for the trees, and my job, on top of everything else, not just a personal injury, not just trying to get, money compensated for them, but sometimes it's about managing things for them. And we saw this a lot during the hurricane.
Right.
Those, where I'd say, they're like, well, I'm trying to meet with this contractor, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to get, I was like, once you hire me, you won't have to do these things anymore.
Right.
You can take this off of your list of things to worry about. Likewise, if it's like a car accident, right? You're like, well, the adjuster's always calling and he's doing this and I don't know what to say. And that's why I say, we've got it. You don't actually need to do anything else. You can put this aside. But the act of shouldering our clients' problems, or at least they're still their problems, but at least helping them bear that burden, it can be tiresome. And we don't always do, your kind of run-of-the-mill, like big box law firm stuff. I mean, we had a gentleman who was on the streets in Guatemala. His parents had sold him for having his organs harvested. He somehow managed to escape, but then was picked up and brought to an orphanage. He doesn't know his birth name. He doesn't know his actual birth date. And he was abused in this orphanage until he was 18, and then just sort of let go, I think in the United States, we are very easy to forget just how difficult life can be for some people, and just how challenging other societies are. I mean, we got a lot of problems here in New Orleans, but that's not one of them, thank God.
Right.
But I agree, and the only way, if you're going to be shouldering those types of burdens, and thinking about those things, because that's what we do all day long as a lawyer, was always thinking, we're always crafting in our minds, what's the best way to say this? What's the best way to present this?
Right.
What's the most convincing way to convey this information? Which means you're playing it over in your mind over and over again. Then you have to break from mental health.
You do, absolutely.
So we're running pretty far right now. So I've got my 6-year-old, we're going to leave here. I got a football game. I got a baseball game going right after that. I got my daughter's baseball game. My wife's got a jury, well, not a jury trial, but she's got a major trial in Michigan coming up. And so she's flying out for, a conference for that. So someone said the other day, I feel like I haven't talked to you. And I was like, you haven't. We haven't spoken to each other because I am going so fast. My routine is ridiculous.
Yes.
So I need to get a good trip on the books. I'm always jealous when I see you guys. Where were you in Mexico?
We went to, where did we go? We went to a couple of places. We went to Cancun, and this past summer we went to where my dad's from. My dad's from a place called Teocaltiche, and we even brought our dog, so it was pretty special. I think it was funny because we were at the airport, I'm going to be honest, so we get pulled, we get stopped at the airport, and they're giving me all these problems about bringing this puppy into Mexico. And then the lady starts talking to me, and she has an immigration question. I'm like, oh, man, I haven't even left the airport. It's already
right,
corrupt.
You're still working, talking about work.
And I'm already talking about work. But I think that there's so many beautiful places to see. And I don't like repeating places, so we like trying out new places so we can say that we've been. So.
But you seem like you guys are beach. You guys,
we do.
Yeah,
we do.
You
We
like
love the
warm
beach.
weather.
We like the warm weather.
I like going to the mountains. I like the cold
I
weather.
tried Mount Zion last year. That was like a
Yes.
big thing for me. I'm not like an outdoorsy person, but I did it, and I really enjoyed it actually.
That's very pretty. And it's the first time I was out west, it was like it took my breath away when I saw it for the first time.
It's just beautiful. Like you can just stand there and just
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's almost like the weather's just like a non-factor, like not like
Right.
it is here, right? You're very aware
Right.
of the weather in Louisiana, no matter what it is. Like even if it's like the winter, you're very aware of the weather. I think there's like the moisture or something. But I was in Utah, and for the first time was like seeing these red rocks. And I think the issue is that you've never in your life have you seen anything like that.
Right.
And you can travel the world, and I don't know any other place that's going to look like that. And it truly like knocked me back, and I had to take a second and just
Well,
just look
the
at
views
it.
are amazing. The fact I like going places too where my daughter can get off of her phone. So when we go to Mexico and we go to Utah and we go to places like that, are places where there's not really strong signal, and it's
Right.
great because she's forced to like look at things and walk and enjoy things outside of what's on her screen.
We are living in cheap seats right now because my wife and I were very proud when we were like, we don't allow. But I mean, my kid's like 6 years old. Like he's not really asking for a cell phone. They're gonna. But we still haven't figured out what that age is going to be. We know that we feel very strongly against it, and we also know that we're probably going to break.
It's funny. It's a whole new generation. Like my daughter, I asked her something about. I asked her how much was 20 times something, and she was counting this money for me, and I swore that she was going to be like, use the calculator, but instead she's like, "Hey Siri, what is this?" And I'm like, "Oh my God!" She even took a shorter shortcut than I thought she was going to take, and I was like, "Okay." And then I realized that's just the world that she grew up in. That's you ask her a question, she's like Alexa, and so that's it.
Maybe they in the 60s, they would have the slide rule, and they'd probably say that we were lazy for using a calculator.
Right.
I guess it's all the same.
You just got to keep up with it.
We use Siri. My kids, when we drive them to school in the morning, my kids will be like, "Hey, Daddy, how many steps is it to the mountains?" And I'll be like, "Where?" And they're like, "In Colorado." And so I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how many. So they're like, ask Siri. I'm like, we're not asking Siri. He's like, no, ask Siri. I'm like, hey, Siri, how many steps is it? My phone's probably going to go off. I'm like, how many? Siri knows. She's got it down. She knows her stuff. That's actually. You hear that? I knew it. It's even on silent.
Pretty
and it's
funny.
all right. I'm as bad as they are.
I like it.
So we're in this fun stage where we got them alarm clocks with Alexa.
Okay.
And so and then you can see like how different your kids are. So my daughter, like the alarm goes off, she gets dressed, she comes downstairs, and it wasn't a one-off thing. We're 3 weeks into this, and then she wakes me up about 1 minute before, before I've already snoozed once. If Lindsay's out of town, my wife's out of town, left my own devices, like I might snooze again, but she'll wake me up right before I'm about to hit that snooze. So it's really great. So now I've like built-in alarm clock. My son, I can hear him screaming in his room. He's like, Alexa, Alexa, off. So we're kind of, it's fun, they're having a lot of fun with it. I guess there are, that's how they experience the world, through technology. And it's only foreign to us because we just weren't raised that way.
Right.
So I guess maybe I need to embrace it.
Do you ever bring your children to the office? Like, do you ever have them around here? Do they watch what you do?
Sometimes. So they used to do that when they were little, but now they do all the kid stuff, and so they got like, school,
practice,
karate, practice, and so I'm usually like rushing to get out of here. Everybody knows like if I say like I have to leave. Like, so my wife will now give me a fake time. She's like, I need you to go pick up the kids from swimming. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Oh my God, we're like twins.
I'll be like, what time? She's like, they need to be picked up at 5:15. I was like, 5:15, huh? I was like, that's what time it ends? She's like, yeah. I was like, all right, well, get there at 5:15. Well, sure enough, man, it's like 5 o'clock. I'm still here. I got to make my way all the way uptown. I haven't blown it, but I am flying down the street to get there on time. And I get there. I'm all right. It's like 5:16, right? The kids aren't going to be crying or anything. Doesn't end until 5:30, And they're still swimming. I was like, what's going on? It's like, the friend in there was like, it doesn't end until 5:30. And I'm like, my wife lied to me. I'm so glad she did that. I was like, you could always lie to me, by the way. That's great. Like, always give me the wrong time, because then I don't have to worry about it.
Oh, we're eye to eye. It must just be like our profession, I think. Abby, I have to pick her up from school, and at first I was like, oh, I got to be on time. She's going to be like the last kid standing in line. Now I'm kind of used to it, and she is too. She's like, it's okay. My mom's probably picking me up today. She knows that if she's last in line, that's because I'm coming. So
it's a little hard. My kids are the first one at school, and they're the last ones to get picked up routinely. But, and my wife and I, she struggles with this more than I do. But, we were both raised, both of my parents worked, both of her parents worked. She grew up in the Midwest. Her father worked at the steel mill. So, Christmas at the steel mill, they're making steel.
Right.
And so they don't close down for holidays. And, her mom, in those days worked in retail. And so, Christmas Eve, the day after Christmas, Christmas Day, like those stores are open. So, she always has this like feelings of guilt that I don't necessarily have. Because
do your children understand what you do?
Oh, my kids? Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what do they think you do?
I go to Cork, okay, and I'm the boss, and I drive the bus. That's
I like it.
If I'm wearing a suit, they're like, "Oh, you going to Cork?" And I'm like, "Yeah, buddy, I'm going to Cork." I don't correct it because it's too cute.
I like it. I think that my daughter used to tell me that I could just press a button on my wrist, and that if I was worried or anxious at court, that I could just call her on my wrist, and she'd make me feel better.
Make you feel better.
Yeah,
that's sweet.
I know.
Well, I think that there's always advantages and disadvantages, and so whereas I don't love that my kids are the last ones to get picked up, the advantages, that they get from, I think, seeing, not just me, really my wife. She's the real powerhouse attorney. Being able to see her, really do something and really, create law, be creative, and flying all over the country and doing like amazing work. So, it's the work-life balance. There is no, it's completely out of balance. It's a tug of war. But for every disadvantage, I do think that there is an advantage there. And I do think that they'll see that. And I hope that they model it. I hope that they see that, hey, if you want something in life, you have to work really hard. If you want to make a change, you don't do it, but you do it by hard work. And so.
Right. Well, I don't keep pictures of my daughter in the office because sometimes I do deal with people who are running away from like really dangerous situations or dangerous people. But sometimes I'm there late and I'm like trying to work on helping a person who's in immigration detention and they're trying to get out, and it's kind of inevitable that my daughter's there with me. So sometimes, in the past she's played with like maybe like a kid who was in the waiting area, and then when we're on our way home she realizes, wow, Mom, you're gonna bring his mom back. And like she's like now has this different kind of mentality about what it is that I do, And it's kind of funny because she looks at what I do as a positive thing, as a good thing, and immigration is very controversial. And the other day somebody made a comment, and I think it was like the first time I ever had to explain to her that there are some people who think that what I do is really wrong, right? That it's not something that's positive, that it's not, they're not seeing what Mom does as a good thing because they think differently about what I do. So that was the first time we had to have a conversation about that kind of took me out of like, in her mind, it's like my mom saves people, my mom helps people. And it was just something that she had a hard time understanding, like why would somebody not agree that what I was doing was a good thing? Right.
Well, fortunately, I haven't had to have that conversation, but there are a lot of people who think what I do is not a good thing too.
Right.
But I just tell them they're wrong.
Do you want your children to be lawyers too?
Well, I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
But
what changed your mind?
No one was ever going to let me into medical school. That was never going to happen. Actually, I never even made my way through the pre-meds. I started college as a physics major. It's ridiculous. I was not good at physics, by the way, or math, or at least that math. And I was pre-med. So pretty quickly, I realized that was out of the question. It wasn't until after school and you get to that challenging part of your 20s where you're like, you don't really know where you are. You're in this lost time. And I started working, but I was the 16th member of my family to be sworn into the bar.
Wow.
So me, it was like coming out. It would be like, I don't know how to say this, but I'm thinking about going to law school. And I was really prepared because everybody was like, oh, no, you're not the lawyer. She's the lawyer. Your sister will be a lawyer. You won't be. And I was really worried about it and like uncomfortable. And it was like I had to admit it to like it's something's wrong with me. Like I had to admit it to myself. Like I think I might be able to do this. And I told a good friend of mine I was working with at the time from college, and I said, I went into his office. I said, hey, let me just run something past you here. But, all these like working I'm doing and the sales I did and, looking at these contracts, I'm kind of like thinking like, what if I went to law school? And I was just sort of testing the waters just to see what he would say. And he said, Justin, that is the best idea I've ever heard. You would be awesome at that. It was like it was the best response I could have gotten. Had it been any other response, I don't know what would have happened or what the trajectory of my life would have been, but it was the best response. It was, and it meant the world to me because I was saying this thing that I was really worried and uncomfortable and self-conscious about.
And somebody was giving you affirmation that it was a good decision, right?
Right. And so I hadn't seen him because then, I moved back to New Orleans. I went to law school. 20 years has passed, and now we're at our 20 college reunion a few years ago. And I saw him for the first time. And I went to him. I said, do you remember that day? And he cut me off. And he said, yes, of course I do. And he's like, and look at you. I follow you on social media. And he's like, you did it. This is amazing. And it was like, we gave each other a big hug. It was what I needed at the time I needed it. And so that's kind of when I wanted to go to law school. But your question about our kids, I don't know. Do I want them to be? I want them to be whatever they want to be. I want my kids to be happy. And if that's being a lawyer, being a doctor, being a school teacher, I don't care what it is. As long as they're happy and they get fulfillment. That being said, there's no way my kids are not going to become lawyers. There's just absolutely, yes. And I can see both of them. Because I can see one's just like my wife and one is just like me.
That's funny.
And I'm like, oh man, you guys, I'm sorry. It's
so
genetic.
You know how you said that you were like lost in your 20s and it's kind of like the point where you try to make a decision about which direction you're going? So for me, that came after law school. Because I think up until then I had all this pressure that like I was the first one in my family to go to law school. Yeah. And so the first one to kind of have that type of degree. And so after law school, I was exhausted. Right? So like high school, kept it up, college, law school. So after law school, I did something that's called JVC. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. So basically, you live with a group of people. You have a vow of poverty. And so you live off of like $80 a month. So you pull together the money of the people who live in your house. Everybody works for an organization that's for social justice. And then your other expenses are covered, but you're living off of $80. That's your vow of poverty. Because your focus is supposed to be on discovering how important social justice is. So I did that after law school, and it was like I was totally the anomaly because a lot of people do this like between college and deciding where you're going to go in your next step, right?
The 21-year-olds are doing it.
Right. So I'm like the old person in this program, and everybody calls me mom because of it. And so, but I really did feel like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not so lost, right? But it's because I was with a bunch of lost people. But it turned out to be like I made some really good friends. I had for being the year that I was supposed to be the poorest, I felt the richest in the world. Like I got to go to Guatemala to teach a class on human rights. I got to go to Honduras and watch people when they get off of a plane when they've been deported back to Honduras. I got to teach a class at a university in Honduras. I got to travel to Canada to do a presentation.
That's
I
amazing.
learned so much.
Yeah.
And so I think that I just want my daughter to have experiences. Like I know, you asked me about the travel, and it's because I just want her to know that there's so much out there. Like anytime we do a trip in the U.S., whatever city we go visit a school. Like she's been to Brown, she's been to Harvard, she's been to Yale. I just want her to know that there's so many things out there and that she doesn't have to settle for whatever's right in front of her.
Right. And we all, well, by the way, is that how you found out that you wanted to do immigration work?
No, so I think that like I've always been a translator, right? My parents didn't speak English. I mean, they've spent half of their lives here in the U.S. I think that they've now lived here in the U.S. more than they've lived in their home countries. But I started off as like a child translator, and if you wanted to speak to my parents, even if you saw me and I was like this 12-year-old, I would think it's okay, you're going to be back because they're not going to understand you. You're going to need me. And then I learned that I wanted to be the voice of people like my parents. Mm-hmm. But once, when I went to law school, my first year in law school, I did clinic because you're not supposed to do clinic till the end, right? But they didn't have any Spanish speakers and they needed me. So I got to do clinic my first year. And when I went to my first detention center, I went with Hiroko. She's the head of the immigration clinic. And she was going to give this talk. And so she says, go ahead. And I'm like, I've never been here before. I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, no, go ahead. You know, you can do this. And I'm like, what am I doing? And so basically I had to like give this talk about people's rights and what they could do and how to defend themselves pro se. And then after I did that, I learned, oh my God, there's so many people like my parents and so many people that need a voice. And there's no way that I can be all these people's voice. So I just wanted to be somebody's voice. But then I thought, okay, I can't just be an interpreter because an interpreter can only take me so far. You don't have any power to do anything.
Right.
So this was the only way that I could have to be the person's voice and have power to do something about it, is what I thought. But I never wanted to go to law school. I really didn't like law school. I didn't like anything. I didn't want to learn about anything except immigration law, because that's when I felt that I could help. I felt that that's where like I could actually put to use everything that I had learned so far.
That is an awesome story, and it's very genuine. You know, doing personal injury lawyers love to act like they're doing the Lord's work, right? It's really,
but
you see it on TV.
People who have issues, though.
I know, but you see it on TV, and these guys are like, you know, they're so full of it. But every now and then you do really get to help somebody, but you really do get to help people every day.
But you do too, and I learned that. So when I lived in DC, I lived in Virginia. I worked for a nonprofit in DC, that's like the hub of like all the lower Catholic charities throughout the U.S. And when I moved back, I worked for a personal injury attorney, and I thought the same. I thought, okay, I don't know if I'm going to like this. I don't know if I'm really doing something that's going to help somebody. But I worked in that firm with the caveat that I was going to do immigration work, but I was going to help them with like administrative stuff. And so what I learned was, you know, at the end of the day, you are also helping people. It's just different.
It's a different
matter. It's a different matter. Like, you know, a person who lost their house or, you know, can't get back in their home or can't drive or got hurt at work, you're still helping a person. It's just different. I like what I do, and it's stressful. I am always the underdog. I had, you know, last week I had this couple that came in that wanted me to help one of their workers. And so they're just very remote from the type of lifestyle that their worker lives, right? And so he says, you know, I keep, you know, keeping him updated as the case is going forward. And he's just like, you know, how can you just keep taking? Every day it's just bad news. And I guess I don't see it that way, because in my head I thought, it seems horrible, but it's actually really good news what I'm giving you. And I thought, it's just because I'm used to being the underdog. And I told him, I said, look, when I took his case, I said, there's like 1% that we're going to be able to get this man off, released, and that there's something that we're going to be able to do. I said, I guess I'm just used to being the underdog. It doesn't seem that bad to me. And I get a lot of people who come in our office who have no understanding of what the immigration system is like. And all they know is that the one person that's in their life that works for them, or that's, you know, some part of their life, they want to help that one person, because that one person is a great person. That one person goes to work. That one person sends their money to their family. That one person is important to them.
Right.
And then once they realize, and they come to me and they ask me the question about how to help that person, and despite the fact that they're telling me this person doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, just goes to work, sends all their money to their family, does all these great things, and I tell them, that sounds great, but there's absolutely nothing I can do. Because unless he's been a victim of a crime, unless he's been hurt, unless his kid is really sick and has cancer or autism or something very seriously, there isn't a lot that I can do. And so once they realize that that's the answer to that, it like blows their mind to think there's got to be something that we can do. And then that's when they start asking the right questions, right? Like, why isn't there something? And that's when I start explaining, because we have really poor written laws, right? There's not laws that can cover or can help those type of people in that situation. And so I think that it's not until that moment when they have that person that they want to help that they start asking those questions, right?
Yeah. You know, we deal with this a lot. We get a lot of calls all day long. And, you know, 80% of them, there's nothing that I can do for you.
Right.
You know, and they don't understand that, you know. And I said, well,
because they hear all these things, right? And
right.
it's like, why can't you? I heard this and I heard that. And
you know, and we see it most in the workplace. You know, that's like the most common call I get is, you know, someone was like, well, I've been working with this company, I've been loyal to this company, and for no reason at all, they fired me. And it's always, I feel bad because there's just nothing that I can do for you. And they say, why? And they're like, well, I've heard this and I've heard that. I was like, that's because you're reading the news about what happens in like California.
Right.
You're not in California. You're in Southeast Louisiana.
Right.
And you know.
But you know what I learned about that? I learned that there's so much value in just telling the person that there isn't anything that you can do, right?
Because it gives them a peace, right? Peace of mind.
At least they understand it. I feel like it's one thing to like, oh, I don't know if I can do anything. But it's another thing to understand why you can't,
Right.
and that something doesn't exist, that it's not you personally. It's just there isn't anything to be able to help in that particular situation. I think there's a lot of value in just disseminating that information.
I think it is one of the times where clients are the most appreciative is
Right.
when I say, look, you do not have a case, but let me explain to you what's going on. Let me explain to you
Right.
why, because I bet I'm not the first lawyer you've called.
Right.
And I was like, I'm just going to explain to you how this works. And you're right. I mean, I can think of very specific instances where they're like, oh my God, no one's ever taken the time to kind of tell me that.
Right.
And but I always follow because I'm a lawyer, right? Because I'm always like,
Right.
but, talk to another lawyer. They might disagree. They're like, no,
Right.
no, Justin, if you're telling me there's nothing there, I think it's time for me to just move on
Right.
and I'll figure something else out. And I think giving them that closure sometimes is like the best thing that I can do for them.
Right.
We talk about that a lot here because everybody wants to help.
Right.
And everybody always wants to, I told them to call, and then they come up with some acronym, and I was like, well, who is that? And they're like, oh, I don't know. They take, and I was like, well, you don't know anything about that company,
Right.
So I was like, look, sometimes we just have to tell people, that there's nothing that we can do to help them. There isn't another place to call. I can tell you to call a pro bono,
Right.
company, but they're going to tell you the same thing. So there is a community in all of America, but certainly in this community, that really needs help with, pretty basic legal issues that
Yes.
they're not getting.
Absolutely.
And it's really unfortunate. I mean, and with the volume of calls we get, we just see it all day long. I mean, it's wrongful evictions, harassment in the workplace, discrimination, but because of where we live, there's no way for a lawyer to frankly monetize it.
Right.
And so, a lot of, if I were to ever, people are always like, if you won the lottery, like the big lottery, right? What are you going to do? And I always think I would love to open like a pro bono clinic, not for like plaintiffs, but for like people being sued. We get that
Right.
call constantly where someone is like,
Right.
someone's actively being sued and they have no choice but to show up pro se.
That's the hardest person of who to refer to because nobody's going to take their case. There's nothing that they're going to gain out of it.
Right.
And so it's kind of hard because you feel for the person. You also don't know which direction to point them in.
There's
so
nowhere
what
to
do
send
you do?
them,
Right.
That's the real answer. And
Right.
I've said that 100 times. Do you have anyone you could send me to? And my answer is always the same. I wish I could, but there's no one that I know who is going to be able to help you. Everyone's going to say the same
The
thing.
gentleman that came to the office last week, he says, I went to all these big law firms before I came to see you. And he's like, and I kept asking, who can, they kept telling me, well, we can help you because he's like this big businessman. He's like a real estate developer. And so he's like, well, we represent you. He's like, but he kept saying, well, who represents the other person? Like, who represents the person that works for him? And he said, oh, no, we don't do that. He said, one law firm told me, he says, we don't do that because that doesn't make money. And so I told him, I said, yeah, it doesn't. I said, it doesn't. I said, what I do is not a lucrative business. I said, it's people's lives. It's just very different. Like, there's two types of immigration. There's business immigration, and then there's what I do. Business
Right.
immigration is where the money's at, right? You're dealing with people who want to come work for companies. You're dealing with the big, massive companies that can afford a big employees.
You don't hear as much talk about. I mean, I know a lot of the lawyers that do that, and I'm good friends
Right.
with a lot of them. But on the political side, you don't hear as much about that.
Right.
No one's bitching and moaning
Right.
about the 10,000 people that work for Marriott
Right.
that aren't from here. You
Right.
know.
So it's very different. So I deal with the people who don't have money to pay me, who are running from really crazy things that sound like they should be in a movie, who sometimes are very uneducated, but they are survivors. They're so persistent. Like, I always admire that because it's like, I don't know that I could do that. Last week I had a guy, we were asking for a bond for his release. He's a really good person. I gathered 49 letters of people saying that this man was like kind, like he brings this woman to church every day at 6:30 in the morning. He's got a child who's autistic, and everybody said all these wonderful things about him. And I thought, I don't know if I could like that quickly gather 49 people to like write a letter about me.
Right.
Like, I think it's just, and maybe I can. I'm just saying, but it was amazing to me to think that 49 people came forward out of their day to write a letter and to say that this person was a good person. And so I did. It was funny because his boss, he's a little bit of a, I'm going to go as far as saying racist just because, he's the type of person who thinks that what I do is wrong, like that people shouldn't be here, that people steal people's jobs, that people don't pay taxes, like all the little sound bites that you hear that's negative about what I do. And so when I was writing his letter, he said all these things. And then I was reading his letter back to him, and he's like, oh, no. He's like, don't put that in there. I don't want to say that. I said, no. I said, we're definitely putting those things in there. And he said, why? And I said, I'm going to explain to you why. I said, because if a person like you who thinks the way you do
still feels that way,
is sitting here
and
fighting,
still going to fight for him,
for this man to get out, I said, that letter's worth 1,000 times more than anybody else's.
I love that. That's awesome. And he's working.
Yeah.
This gentleman, is working hard. We are a product of our environment and our lived experiences. And one of ours is Hurricane Katrina. And I've never been happier to see, a change and a cultural shift in New Orleans like Hurricane Katrina.
Absolutely.
I didn't know very many people who spoke Spanish growing up in New Orleans or Southeast Louisiana. And now, we struggle as a business because, as I say, sometimes I used to speak very bad Spanish. now very poor Spanish. Now I don't speak any of it. But we almost can't operate without it. Because there's so many Spanish speakers here.
It's very different. In middle school, I was like 2 of like 3 Hispanic people in my school. In law school, in our class, I was like the only Hispanic speaker, which is why I got to do clinic.
Right.
So it's just,
I bet it's different now.
Oh, it's very different. Very different. So when we were in law school, it's just funny. I came home with a BALSA t-shirt, like the Black Law Students Association. And my mom said, what are you wearing? And I said, oh, it's a BALSA t-shirt. It's Black Law Student Association. And she's like, you can't join a Hispanic one? And I said, they don't have one.
We don't have one.
I was like, so this is it for me.
That's it. I'm the one. You can make it. You're like, right? you can make your own t-shirt.
And by the end of the time we graduated, they had one. But I thought it was always funny that my mom's like, why? What are you doing? So.
Well, hey, Miriam, I'm so glad you could come on the show.
Thank you for
so
having
much.
me.
Let our listeners know where they can find you.
So I am on the West Bank. You can always reach me. My number is really easy to remember. It's 504-881-1818.
That is easy.
And I am happy to help anybody who's got an immigration question. That's what I do. I like what I do. And if you're willing or you want to help somebody that's in a situation that I can help in, I'm always happy to.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for
having me. It was great catching up with you. Great seeing you. I haven't seen you in many years. So.
I know. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on Above the Legal Limit. If you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more about business and law, hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like the show, keep it to yourself. Remember, there's no limit to what we can achieve. We will see you next week. Until then, even though we're above the legal limit, let's drive safely. Cheers, everyone.